It's not until you're able to step back. And I really think that that creates that binary placement, either the good or the bad, because that's kind of how we are. And if someone has not experienced, someone has not lived it, they really don't see it. They don't think that it exists. And I think that that is real. They think that it's just isolated incidences because they don't have enough exposure to Black life and Black culture to realize that it is not an exception, like that's reality.
Right.
Right.
Sandra?
Yeah, I was just agreeing that when we make it, when she talks about the binary and we make it so black and white, that it gets reduced and that people don't see the nuances. And I think it was that one scholar that she quoted on page 72 that says, is systemic, racism is systemic, societal, institutional, omnipresent, embedded phenomenon, and it pervades every vestige of our reality. For most whites, however, racism is like murder. The concept exists, but someone has to commit it in order for it to happen. Right. You know, so it just makes it so black and white. And, you know, I think she used examples in the, you know, on the same page is, you know, racists were always bad, you know, they're Southern, they're white, I mean, they're old, they're mean. And then, you know, by contrast, good is I'm from the North, so I can't be racist, you know, I'm educated, so I can't be racist. And all of those things we know are not true. But that is the way that, you know, people tend to see it, yeah.
Which is crazy because I lived in Chicago for a year and I came back telling people that I didn't know which was worse. You know, walking into a northern grocery store, like a white grocery store, and getting looked at like, why do you belong here? But with a smile nonetheless, because it's polite, versus in the South where they just blatantly racist. So I'll tell you don't belong here. Like, I don't know which one is worse. But whenever you start looking at the Midwest and the North, like there are very distinct neighborhoods separated by color lines. Mm-hmm. And crossing those boundaries gets you looked at sideways.
Oh yeah, I can't stand the passive aggressive racism. I can't stand it. Like, just be straight up with me so I can go ahead and punch in your face. But the passive aggressive stuff is like they walk that line to where it's like, you know, I can't say that they're inciting a riot because they call me the N-word, but you know, it's like the little teehee, and you know, my white my white privilege and my white supremacy and superiority over you, but not really being able to do anything about it.
Mhm. 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 Because it's not as blatant.
I think it's interesting to think about when they talk about the individual acts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay. When they were talking about the individual acts of racism, I was thinking about, you know, how it's like, you know, you have an incident where something is blatantly racist and it's caught on videotape or, you know, by iPhone. And then it's like, oh, racism. And so, and it's so embedded in every corner and thread and river into the country in terms of the fabric of it and how it was built up and all the systems and who's in control and who has power and what your options are and what, you know, the hand you get dealt. So it's just interesting how they try to limit it in that way to an incident that says, oh, now let's look at racism, where it's in every fabric of the society.
Right. And I think it was really cool how she broke it down to the difference in like the veiled racism when she talks about what exactly qualifies in the white mind and as racism, and to her it's like when people claim to be colorblind, or when they claim to value diversity,
right,
and really looking at how they think it's conscious intolerance, that a racist person just can't even stand to be around a black person or interact with them. When, in all actuality, like she stated, is they interact with us all the time.
Sure do. They sure do.
So, them trying to hide behind these different things is them saying that, oh, that doesn't qualify because that's not me.
right,
Okay.
right.
And even when she talks about how they try to talk about reverse racism and how it doesn't exist, because as a whole, we don't hold that power, that collectiveness as a society to be able to oppress, another race as white people do.
Right.
And the other thing that was interesting when she was saying, people saying, "Oh, my parents taught me not to be racist," and she was like, no, that argument doesn't work, because a racism-free upbringing isn't possible, because it's a social system, embedded in the culture.
Right. I thought that was a really important distinction that she was making, because I often feel like people do get that confused in terms of having prejudices or discriminating against someone, and then the system of racism and how deep and complex that is. It's not just, oh, you're a racist, which is another thing, but I like how she made that distinction between them. And I like how she broke down too about the, the colorblind and all those kind of things, because it's like almost like you want an easy fix to absolve yourself of being complicit in the system. So you say, I don't see color. And it's like, that's not even possible unless you're colorblind, literally. You have to see it. Now, what you do with that is the bigger question. Where do you go after you see it? You know what I mean? Are you making assumptions? Are you feeling uncomfortable?
Right.
If it's a certain, because, that's what has to be looked at, not just whether or not you see the color, because the colors are beautiful, and that whole thing, like, I don't see color. It's like, that's not the issue, whether or not you see the color.
Right, exactly.
I like when I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. I'm sorry. I was going to say, yeah, even on that, I like when she mentioned all those little examples too. And like when she brought up the one of people saying, well, I have relatives that are color or whatever. And I was like, I knew somebody who was white, who was married married a black man, had mixed race kids. But I always thought she still had some hangups and she couldn't see it. And I was just like, I thought I was crazy, and I was like, I know I'm not crazy, because especially when it comes to hair and stuff, especially how people still think European style is the right style. When I wore my hair curly, she would say, "Oh, you need to do something with your hair." When I wore it straight, "Oh, your hair is so cute." And even when she refers to her daughter's hair, "Oh, it's just so unmanageable. You don't understand." I'm like, it really is. You just don't know how to manage it. Like, it's always these other little things. Huh?
And I mean, I think it's only been recently that there's even been any kind of push the hair care products and the things that would help us be able to take care of and style our hair and all the different myriads of curl patterns that it does and all that kind of stuff. So I think 20, 30, 40 years ago, we were just pressing it and burning it and trying to get it to assimilate and, get the white community to chill out. We're like, well, how can we make you guys feel a little bit more comfortable?
Right.
Maybe if we straighten it, you won't be so angry.
Right.
Let's try to
honestly,
trade that.
right. And
Right.
honestly, a part of me even wonders if the reason she went black was just to rebel against her parents, because her parents were very Southern Texas racist. And she rebelled as a teenager and started doing drugs and stuff like that. And when she got with a black guy, it really pissed her parents off. And I wonder if part of that is that reason too. I hope not, but I be wondering. Sorry, I'm driving.
Well,
Yeah,
see,
I think
It's funny.
when she
Oh
gave
wait,
that
before we go on,
example,
who's on the LG stylo?
isn't that Jessica?
Who's on the LG stylo?
That may be me. Hello.
Okay,
Yeah,
Can
I
you
was
hear
just
me?
making sure because I was like, I know I let
Can you
it
hear
had your
me?
name at first and then it
Me?
changed and I was like, I
Can
hope
you hear
we're
me?
not talking over anybody.
Me? Can you hear
Yeah.
me? Me?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you.
So who is it?
Girl, I'm about to hang up on you. But
No, can you hear me?
yes.
I'm sorry. I'm literally leaving the driveway because I woke up late and I gotta go pick up my medication. And I'm hoping that it still works over 4G. So hopefully it works.
but going back to the kids, I think that she also presented something that was very interesting when she was talking about a parent training a child not to say certain things overtly racist is just teaching them self-censorship rather than, the deeply embedded racial messages that they absorb. And then when she pointed out the study about the children saying that the children showed they did not become less racially biased with age, but that they had learned to hide their racism in front of adults. When she was talking about the experiment that was done with the white children giving the black children or the white child money, and what happened when an adult was present and when an adult was not, and that the younger kids, theirs really didn't change the way they did theirs, but the older kids would treat the black child fairly if an adult was in the room, right? But if the adult wasn't in the room, then they went back to their, being, their little racist like behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting.
Well, I think we are kind of taught to aren't some people kind of taught to hide your prejudices? You might try to cover up in certain situations how you feel about something. Because we all have certain little prejudices and biases or things that make us that we don't like or that we see a certain way. Just I think that's just human nature,
And I think she said even later, I think this is in a different chapter, how white children are born, into the privilege, but yet nobody addresses it. So nobody kind of ever talks to them about being born into the privilege and into as racism as a systemic issue, not just an act. Therefore, it never gets addressed, and it's boiled down to these very simplistic concepts of good and bad. And so in order to be good, you hide it, or you don't say certain things, but it doesn't mean that you examined it and have taught them their role or their part in it. And I think we see that over and over. I've seen it so many times in my conversations, with white people that, when she uses all of these examples in the back about, I was taught to treat everyone the same, or, I go on these do-good missions to Africa. I had a conversation with someone recently about that. And so that exempts me from being, a part of the system. I'm better. I'm not a part of that. That's not me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something that she said, and she said it earlier on.
No, wait. I think a lot of times.
Okay. So one of the things that stood out to me too, like she made the comment, she said, I grew up poor, but at least I wasn't Black. And I think that that is kind of the mentality behind it, is that, you know, it's understood that Black people are treated as less than. It's understood that you don't want to be them, but you're only racist if you are mean to them because of it. And so I think like that's kind of the mentality that we see purported, and that's hard to go against because it is systemic. Because the reason there is no White History Month is because all history is white history. Like, and because it's not pointed out, they don't see it.
Yeah. I think what's kind of
I think
scary
a lot of times, especially when she was talking about the censorship, that I must be delayed.
You are.
Yeah, but go ahead.
No, oh, okay. It's because I'm in the car. No, I think going back to that, a lot of times I think when they're training their children up with this censorship, they're creating them to be little mini racist sociopaths. Basically because they can hide it so much better than not having this training of censorship on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And she did mention in the book though that white people don't
And
have to
Nandi,
address
we
it.
met a couple of those in our travels.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think when you have a truncated false and to an extent and like a minuscule piece of history that just celebrates everything that is white and Western or European and is just not inclusive of world history in any real way, then they get this kind of false sense of superiority. And then everything in the society like supports that and reinforces that you are everything. You are the most beautiful, you're the most talented, you're the best actor. And even I think in our eyes and how we start to look at them, because we're so inundated with images, we start thinking they're more attractive than they are. We start going, well, I guess, you know what I mean? Because then our imagery is so compartmentalized in terms of what we're able to see. Even if you get a glimpse of a website about the different types of beauty all over Africa, the women and the looks that we have within our Black, African, Native American line, European too now in America. There's so much diversity in there that it's not, I think the color and the diversity is just not our issue, it's theirs. And I would like to see a book, I don't know if it's out there, that kind of gets at why they have that anger and that propensity to this violence that just gets really out of control in terms of how it's been perpetrated out against people and the levels
that's a good question.
The levels that they, when I think about some of the things that they were doing and I try to like really think about it, I really can't in a way. It's that horrifying, like, you guys were doing that? Really? Like, why? What was the motivator? Because I've been angry and I've, had things go down or whatever, but that is a level that that's what I want to understand. Where is that coming from?
Well, I mean, I think that's whenever you get into like the psychology
and
of it,
she
though.
touched on that.
Go, Shonda.
No, go ahead.
I forgot what I was about to say.
That's what happens. You lose it. Come back.
Shonda, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say touching on what Nandi was talking about when she was talking about the violence. She talks about that in chapter 7 of Anti-Blackness when she says, scholars have argued that whites split off from themselves and project onto black people the aspects that we don't want to own in ourselves. For example, the white masters of enslaved Africans consistently depicted the Africans as lazy and childlike, even as they toiled at back-breaking work from sunup to sundown. Today, we depict blacks as dangerous, a portrayal that perverts the true direction of violence between whites and blacks since the founding of this country. This characterization causes aversion and hostility toward black people and feelings of superiority towards ourselves, but we cannot morally acknowledge any of those feelings. And then she talks about how whites need black people because blackness is essential to the creation of white identity. It's essential to the creation of white supremacy.
Yeah, I thought that was profound when she said that. Like you said, how can you be, if you didn't have black people, what would your sense of self be? Yeah, I thought that was really profound when she said that. And like you said, just the lack of acknowledgement about, where did that whole stereotype came from when she talks about how we built the country, but yet we're seen as, immoral, lazy, lacking motivation, all of these things that are not true, but that is the stereotype that gets placed upon us over and over again.
Well, one of the things that stood out to me, whenever she was talking about whenever Jefferson was president and they were looking at, trying to basically justify slavery. And so he put out a national call for scientists to figure out why Black people were inferior to white people. Not if they were, but why they were. And I think that was kind of the beginning of that systemic, like that merging between the racial inequities and the political justification. And we've just seen that over and over again to the point where there's not one without the other. Like, I think it was Beyonce that made the comment talking about, the racism is so pervasive that whenever you protest it, people think you're protesting America. And I mean, it's true. Like, it's true.
Like they always throw up against people not being supportive of the military, and I'm like, where does that come in at? That we're not supportive of the military. We're talking about a completely separate issue, and that's always what they kind of go back to. You're un-American if you don't support certain things, and it's just like you said, that lack of acknowledgement and denial that we see over and over again. That's just so pervasive. And that's why I think she talks about that, a little bit later in the book when she says, you can't have those conversations because that fragility comes up and defensiveness, and it makes everyone shut down and you're not able to have those deeper conversations.
Right.
Honestly,
I think one of the things that she said when that encompasses everything that everybody else just said. When she said that to put it bluntly, I believe that the white collective fundamentally hates Blackness for what it reminds us of, that we are capable and guilty of perpetuating immeasurable harm, and that our gains come through the subjugation of others.
I was listening to a podcast, and that's what the lady, she was a white attorney that was leading the conversation. And she said that one reason why we find these conversations so difficult is because shame is underneath all of it. And so that's why, if you can't acknowledge that or brings up those feelings of shame, about the things that have been done in the past, then you just reject it and you block it. And you don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Well, she also hits on quite frequently, like she repeats over and over again about the ideas of individualism and meritocracy in America. So basically, each person is a person and each person is worth whatever they are worthy of, whatever they accomplish. That basically, if you work hard enough, you can do whatever you want. And I think that
Right.
that mentality makes it hard to connect to as well, because at the end of the day, I'm not you and you're not me. So you can't say that I'm this because all these other people think this, because that's not how I am. And I think that it's so easy to remove ourselves from the whole that we can literally disassociate with an ideology if we see it as a negative representation of us. You know, if it's something that I would be shameful about, nope, that's not me. I have nothing to do with that.
Right.
But you know, at the end of the day, if it's something to be proud about, like I'm on the team, like I'm here and I'm up front. So I
Right.
think that it is that ability to determine when to not be a part of the whole, because you're an individual and you have that choice, I think plays into it really big as well.
Mm-hmm.
What about the racial triggers for white people? What did y'all think about those?
Racial triggers.
I don't have the book in front of me. Was it the, trying to do this off of memory?
Where she talks about the
Racial triggers for
social
white people.
taboos about talking openly about race and
Okay. Hmm.
uh,
That was interesting.
Can y'all tell me what chapter that's in real quick?
It's
that,
chapter 7, page 100. Yeah, starting on page 99.
Is
Seven.
is that when she was giving all those examples of like the people in the class, like that lady who, so many different situations though, where they were saying, well, I guess I can't say anything because everything I say is wrong, when all they were simply trying to do was like, oh shoot, I'm sorry, I'm at the gas pump. When all they were simply trying to do was inform them of what the problem was. So a trigger would be the openness. It would be
Yep.
I like the idea when they talked about, you know, with the taboos about them kind of being in this insulated, she talks about them being in oftentimes an insulated, protected environment. And I think about the number of states, you know, when I list them off my mind, like West Virginia, Montana, Virginia, Connecticut, Delaware, Idaho, Montana, Missouri, and all these states, and how many communities I'm sure are predominantly white in these states and areas, and how they don't have to come into contact with race in a way sometimes, I think, if they are protected from it, insulated from it. And so I think then it's not a big push to kind of do any of this deeper work on, you know, whether how you're complicit in a racist system in the US, because it's not affecting your day-to-day life.
Right.
In terms of them having such a head start in terms of the communities and the breakdown, I think largely, and the wealth disparity. I think a lot of times they don't want to have to deal with outside of their race, and they don't have to.
LG Stylo, can you mute?
yeah, 1 second. I can't tell that. 1 second.
I got it.
Okay.
All right, Nani, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I don't even remember what I said now, but I'm like, that was a lot. Now I just got it all out. I'm like, what did I say? I think I was talking about her pointing out that a lot of times, in larger numbers, whites are insulated in insulated environments and communities, and so they're not even confronted with race in their
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day life. If you look, I started listing off states, and all these states that I think are predominantly white, like West Virginia, Connecticut, Delaware, Missouri, South Dakota, North Dakota, on and on. So I think a lot of times they don't have to confront race in the same way. So to like want to go do this deeper work of understanding it as a system in America, I think is, you know, a
Right.
stretch
That
for
some
them to have
people,
the impetus or the drive to want to do it because they kind of got such a head start that they don't have to do the work if they don't want to. They can just kind of continue and act like with blinders on, like they don't see their privilege. I think that's been the new conversation is do people see privilege? And
like,
if you're experiencing privilege, would you want to give it up or say, hey, I'm given privilege, I don't want it. It's like human nature too. So I think it's a weird thing of how do you get people to, I guess, act fairly in a way in that sense, to want to be more fair because they're recognizing that they have privilege.
mm-hmm.
That's a tall
Like
order, I think.
Right.
it may not be that they like necessarily have a head start, but like you said, they just may be so insulated. The population of African Americans may be so low, it's nothing that they have to deal with, you
Right.
know. And so if you don't have to, you can keep those blinders on. And then
Mm-hmm.
I think you said that was somebody that talked about that deep investment. I think she talks about that we have a deep investment in a system that benefits us and that we have been conditioned to see as fair. So like you
Mm-hmm.
said, why would I want to give that up? Because first of all, I've been conditioned to see it's fair and I'm getting the benefit from it. So why would I want to change anything? It's uncomfortable
Right.
for me, and I think that's what we see going on today. A
And
Yeah.
I
lot of,
also think
I
it's a,
think one of the most insidious parts of the system is the idea that if you work hard, you can achieve, your dream in America. Because it's not that hard work isn't valuable and like a great quality to have about yourself, to be a hard worker and to set goals and dreams. But when you're within a system that might go, you did all that and we're still going to be unfair. That's really hard for people, I think, sometimes to deal with.
mm-hmm.
In terms of you seeing people acting out in the society that we have with so much violence and you know suicide, even, not to be dark, but people just having a lot of pressure on them. And I think that the society is just too tough in that way. It's too tough here in America right now, the way they're running the system. It's really hard on people, I think, in an extreme way that sometimes when you go to other countries, you do go like, wow, it seems like they might not have everything we've got in America, but they've got something to where more people seem okay. Like they're okay. They're able to be okay. Everybody's not driving in a Bentley or doing this and that. But in terms of a basic level of food, shelter, community, they've got it. And
Right.
so in America, I think that vibe of community has to be rebuilt somehow, even, cross racially, all of it, because we're all here together. So I feel like there has to be that.
I agree, but then the question becomes like, where does it start? Like, I think that getting people to acknowledge, well, I think we all know where it could start. It's just getting people to acknowledge it. And like she made the comparison to women's suffrage, women knew they deserved the right to vote, but because white men still had the ability to determine whether or not they could, they had to be convinced. And I think that it's going to be a very similar thing. Like, I know the statistics were from 2016 and 2017, but she highlighted the largest like American organizations and the percentage of white male leadership in those. And it's
Right.
80% and above across the board. And until there is more representation, I think that we're going to continue encountering the same thing. You can't change a system until you have the power to change a system.
Right. Right.
Oh, no, no, no. Y'all are not going to let Jasmine slide how y'all jumped on me when I made that comment last week.
What happened last week? Fill me in. What happened, Shonda?
No, it was Kayla. It wasn't him. It was Kayla. She was like, "You're not telling us nothing we don't already know." I'm like, "I'm just quoting from the book for the people who don't know."
Yeah. But I mean, it's true though, and I mean, it's sad, but it's reality. And until and like I know that we talked a little bit in the last book about like the white savior complex and how we are so prideful in the fact we don't need any white people to come and save us and this and this, we can do it on our own. Realistically, we can do it on our own, we can create our own, but we will still be a standalone functioning society within the greater realm that is still run by somebody else that doesn't look like us. And it's going to take, as Nandi said, that collaborative effort, that relationship building in order for us to see change on a systemic level. We cannot change the system without support from the other side.
Speaking of the white savior syndrome, what did you guys think about her talking about the blind side, the movie? That came out was several years ago now, where they swooped in and saved. And he couldn't even understand the concept of football. They had to tap into something that was almost just kind of intrinsic, or primal in him, talking about, his need to protect other people. That she was the savior, in that the family was the white savior in that movie. And when she talked about that, I was like, yeah, that movie was so just outlandish, and I don't know.
Disturbing.
I don't know.
It was slightly disturbing.
It was disturbing.
It was slightly disturbing. It had some undertones and some overtones. I don't know what you want to call them between her and the son. And I'm just like, you guys, this is a lot. Like, what is this?
I gotta watch
Look, I thought they were going to end up in bed together.
Exactly. That's what I was alluding to in terms of her and him. Yeah. And then this whole, it reminds me of the one too, the Green Mile. It's kind of like the same caricature, the big, kind, dumb, like giant, and he's kind of all gooey inside and sweet as a protector, but he's not too bright.
Mm-hmm.
And the white savior is a big thing in their whole, they do that on their films and everything. They have a big thing about being the savior and the one. I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe, you have this history of being really mean and doing all these things. So then you have the story of the one who turned back to save one, and used her privilege to help this poor Black, not too bright young man from the hood.
Well, you've also got to keep in mind too that our society supports the idea of reaching back and helping. And I mean, that's why we have these white churches that do these mission trips and all this community outreach and all this other stuff. Like, we are a society where we applaud and we praise the people who save someone or help someone less fortunate. And those I keep using air quotes because where we all see it and we cringed at the dynamic of their relationship and how she does basically come in and treat him like a puppet. Like, all the white people were like, oh my God, look at how caring she is. Look at how much she's giving up of herself and she loves him and she tells him that he's like her other child and she's making all these sacrifices for him and she's such a good Christian. Like, that is the perception. But that further just demonstrates how ingrained the ideology is in America, that they really don't see it. Like, she is the sweetest thing ever, and most white people that I've had come, because I've had this talk with them before, like, what did you see there? And there was like, I mean, Black kids get adopted all the time by white families, and they're helping them out. I mean, they could be in orphanages or homeless shelters, or, you know, being abused or jumped through the foster system, but they took them in to make their lives better. So they're great.
Right.
And in the book, she did mention the way that Sandy Bullock's character got seen that way so much was because she also had the opposition from the extreme.
You're breaking up, Jessica.
Oh gosh. Am I still breaking up?
Yeah.
I quit. I quit.
But I had actually had experience because I've actually worked in done adoptions before, and done that work before. And I remember one of my coworkers, and she used to be my supervisor, that had this mentality, of that white savior complex, so much so that she swooped in. I think she went to a child's home. And so when you're adopted and you get adoption assistance, the state will still make contact with you like at least once a year to make sure the child is still in the home, everything's okay. And she swooped in and, found that child was in a home that didn't have lights. Now, instead of helping the family or connecting them to resources, she swooped in, took that child into the home. I mean, she was, it was so much like the movie. And then later she got upset because he didn't seem grateful, ignored all the trauma of being taken away from his family members, because he was adopted by family members. But it was like, in her mind, the best thing was, and then she literally had this attitude, and I saw it over and over again, that if you could put someone with a privileged family, a white privileged family, then that would be the best thing for them. And she brought this child into her home, and like I said, it backfired because he didn't have to be grateful. He didn't owe her anything. That was a choice she made. And there were other things that she could have done, but that was her attitude, and it just blew up on her. I remember her calling me to ask me where could she go buy knit bones. I mean, she was just so clueless about everything that it was just amazing. That you just don't even see yourself or see the part in the structure that you play. You just see yourself as doing something oh so Christian and wonderful that you don't see how harmful it is.
What do you think about the discussion in chapter 8 when and it's so funny because it was Karen. Of course, it had to be Karen. About interrupting Black people when they're speaking. Like, I've seen this happen before, and when I tell you, it is. I'm just gonna tell you about the incident that happened. So I invited someone to come to one of the crime task force meetings, and that day it happened to be not just the police chief there, but also the sheriff, right? Mm-hmm. And so the gentleman that I was with was making a point, and the sheriff interrupted him. And so he was like, well, I apologize for interrupting you. He's like, okay, that's okay. So he goes on to talk, and what he was talking about was getting training for police officers and others in law enforcement to be able to deal with people who have mental issues, particularly veterans, because that was something that was really close to him, because he was a veteran with PTSD. And instead of allowing him to finish his point, the sheriff interrupted him a second time. And when I tell you all hell broke loose, all hell broke loose. So he tells him, he said, you interrupted me the first time. Maybe it's a mistake, but the second time it's intentional. don't do that. As a man, I'm telling you, don't do that. And the sheriff got so pissed that he got up and stormed out of the room. But what was so funny about it was he had to turn around and come back into the room a couple minutes later because he had forgotten his hat. So every time me and this guy see each other, we just laugh about how they really have this idea that they need to interrupt us or talk over us before we can even get done making our point, because they're always on the defensive.
Mm-hmm. And that's what she talked about, the inability to tolerate stress, racial stress. And so she used that example of the lady that was in the group that she confronted about something she said, and she started, thinking she was going to have a heart attack. And so, that stopped them. So they weren't able to do any actual work, because at that point, it became about her and her stress, and she was having a heart attack. I thought that was hilarious,
That is hilarious.
Yeah, I thought
she talks about it when she talks about how
it's like, girl, you are not having a heart attack right now.
I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing because it's super funny.
Yeah, it was funny. I thought that was hilarious.
But listen, she says that on page 112 when she says if we need to cry so that all the resources rush back to us and attention is diverted away from a discussion of our racism, then we will cry. A strategy most commonly employed by white middle-class women, aka Karen. If we need to take umbrage and respond with righteous outrage, then we will take umbrage. If we need to argue, minimize, explain, play devil's advocate, pout, tune out, or withdraw to stop the challenge, then we will. That is utterly crazy.
Mm. And then when she says, right below that, white fragility functions as a form of bullying. I am going to make it so miserable for you to confront me. No matter how diplomatically you try to do so, you will simply back off, give up, and never raise the issue again. And so it functions to keep people in their place.
Exactly. I can't take it. This is too much for me.
Right. I'm attacking you. I'm racist. And that's the other thing that I see in the workplace all the time, then you get accused of being racist, or, they're being, somehow prejudice is aimed at them just because you say something. Mm-hmm. But like you said, you make it so uncomfortable. And I see this in my own workplace with my own director. So if an issue comes up, he avoids it. Mm-hmm. But instead of confronting it, or instead of talking it through, because it's so uncomfortable, because I know we have someone in our group that always says, I just hate that things are so political now. That's the way she always puts it, That's what she says all the time. I hate the way things are so political. And so, he gets a pass on a lot of the stupid things that she says,
Yeah, it's kind of like you kind of don't want to have to do someone else's work. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about what you carry in terms of being, I'll just say, a person of color, then you're like, I don't want to have to take on making you feel okay about your privilege and where you're at. I can't do that, I'm carrying enough. You've got to carry your part.
Right, exactly.
Them acting fragile about it is just annoying, because it's like,
I think they also quoted says, if privilege is defined as a legitimization of one's entitlement to resources, it can also be defined as permission to escape or avoid any challenges to this entitlement. So you're always trying to escape. You're always trying to minimize And the really cool thing about that quote
Right.
was, it was by Rich Vody, and he was my professor at Valdosta State University, and he led this conversation on white privilege. Yeah, so I thought it was really cool to see my professor
That is cool. That is cool. That's a little personal connection.
Yeah. Ooh, Dr. Vody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Got off the stage. Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh, she's back.
Oh, y'all can hear me better?
Yeah.
I'll let you hear.
Jasmine, did you go to sleep?
No, I'm still here. I told you I'm not caught up with the reading, so my contributions are personal experience and where I'm at. I can't lead a discussion if I ain't read it. I'm gonna do better though next week, Miss Teacher. I promise. I've been tired.
Oh, I know. Ditto. Ditto.
I don't know, but I'm excited about the holidays though, because my household will be interesting if any of y'all get bored and want to come visit.
Are you gonna stir the pot? What's going on?
It's not even me. So I've got cousins that are worse than me who are also biracial. And they are much more vocal, outspoken. Because like I'm the one who I'm going to have an intellectual discussion with you and I'm going to pull out my book and I'll be like, so look right here, this right here by this person right here. Like they are, the louder I am, the more right I am approach. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic this year.
Nice.
This book, it really is interesting to read. I really do wish it wasn't just us reading it, because sometimes I do have to remember that she's talking to white people, because I'm reading it from my perspective and I'm like, it's different. I mean, but trying to get into their mindset, it's interesting. So I'm glad we did choose this one. It's just, yeah, I definitely wish we had some like Caucasian people we could definitely take this with further. And the person I wanted to give it to, I know they would feel offended, so I can't even do it.
Girl, I'm giving my annotated copy away for Christmas. Keep playing with me. Anybody else want to donate theirs to the cause? I got some names.
But she talked about, how difficult it would be for someone, this information to come from an African-American person. But it's hard for her even in leading groups and having these discussions with people, because she says she breaks white solidarity by doing so. I thought that was an interesting point that she made too, that, sometimes they see her as going outside and that she has to actively make decisions sometimes to, go ahead and do what is ethically and morally correct, and not give people a pass. And I also like that she was really honest, I think, in these chapters about just that her own, everything in her was also deeply embedded, and that really she never had to confront this, all of this stuff until she obtained her job as a diversity trainer. And so that even now when she has conversations or there are situations that she has to check herself on, and that her own prejudices come up, and she has to acknowledge that. So I thought that was really good. It's something that you don't hear very often from people.
Well, I think that's kind of the whole intention of her book, is to get people to just acknowledge kind of what's there. Like acknowledge that it is tough, but you just have to have the conversations and you have to take ownership in it. And I think that she does a really good job of doing that. Because it's not easy. And like I said, that's why I was talking earlier with the perspective of oftentimes they don't see it. Like I've got an aunt who lives in literally an all white town. And when I say all, I'm talking about like it's like 99.93% white. And she will argue up and down that racism doesn't exist. And whenever I tell her about things that I've encountered throughout my professional career, she thinks I'm an exception, because another dynamic in our family is that I'm the only one who has a postgraduate degree, even out of all my white cousins. And so then it becomes how are you of all people going to talk about, white privilege, and you have this and you have this while none of us have this. And so it just makes for tough conversations, and it makes it really difficult to see, because like I said, it goes back to that individualism and meritocracy ideology of, if you work hard, you can get where you are. And from their perspective, I'm proof of that, which means that racism doesn't really exist, and the whole American, mantra is true.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second.
And I'd be interested, because with your experience is like, you have to deal with it from both sides, from the white side as well as the black side. So I can only imagine, what it has been like with your experiences throughout your life, having that come at you from like both sides.
Well, I tell people all the time, like, I really didn't realize that race was an issue until I started school. Because growing up, I have lots of biracial cousins. Like, there's a lot of us, like my whole family's mixed. And so I grew up with, that's my cousin. And I had white cousins and black cousins and Hispanic cousins. And that was the norm in my household. And then whenever I got to school and realized that all the black kids hung together, all the white kids hung together, I didn't have anywhere to hang. I didn't really start making friends in school until I started playing softball. And that was because at that point you're a team and you really don't have a choice, but your team sticks together.
Oh, wow.
And that was where I started friendships, because otherwise I was too light for the black kids and too dark for the white kids.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I didn't even realize people who were mixed went through problems until I saw mixed-ish. And I was like, oh, because, back then it was always they preferred lighter tones. I was just seeing it from a darker tone, and I was like, oh, y'all got it made, but you really didn't.
No, because, we're caught in limbo for the most part. Now it's getting better because there is a lot more interracial dating, and I think people are more open to it. And I also think that society has come to just accept us as Black. And so we kind of get grouped, and so we have a place where we belong now, I guess, per se. But yeah, it's been confusing.
Y'all touched on something earlier, and y'all touched on something earlier. I can't remember what it was. Oh, I think you were saying something about they didn't believe you were going through what you went through, and in a similar but kind of not similar way. Earlier today, I was talking to my mom about the stupid situations certain people find themselves in, and she was telling me, like how Little House on the Prairie or whatever show that we both like, and she said she had asked this white woman one day, how did she like the show? And she was like, no. And she was like, why not? And she was like, no family goes through that much tragedy in real life. And I said, what? And I realized they don't think bad things really happen or are there, or they do ignore it, like I was saying in the books. And it's crazy how you can live in such a bubble world. I don't see how you cannot see the suffering of other people, not see that things are actually real, and just ignore it. I mean, the book is telling us how, but it still amazes me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you have to keep in mind they don't really see it. So I taught at a school in Alpharetta, a high school, very wealthy school, and I encountered kids who thought that some of the stories that I told them were made up. Because, like my first year teaching, I was in inner city Chicago. We were allotted 1,000 copies a month, and anything else had to come out of our pockets as teachers. And 1,000 sounds like a lot, but whenever you're teaching 8 classes, 1,000 is assignments for like 8 days maybe out of the month, and the rest of it you got to figure out on your own. And my students would just be like, no, that's not real. I was like, sweetie, you go to a school with white columns and you play Quidditch on Friday afternoons on the front lawn. That's not normal. But in their minds it is, because it's normal. It's what they see every day. Whenever they look at TV and see high schools portrayed, that's what they see every day. And because they're not watching the shows that portray schools from other social classes, they think that that is real. Like they think like that is what is reality, and that's normal.
And that's so dangerous. That's why really this book should be required reading in certain high school classes.
For them.
Yeah, because I mean for everybody, because it's very dangerous to walk around with these thoughts and think these things, and it's just like, and nothing, and you know, schools are so taboo, and like they think everything is risque because they don't want backlash. But this is real. These are conversations that we definitely need to have even today, because it will affect your child when they walk outside of these doors. Like, this is life.
But I guess it goes back to, I think you're so right, but why do I want to be uncomfortable? And I think that's the other point that she's trying to say, is they don't want to be uncomfortable. So why would I make myself purposely uncomfortable? You know, I'd rather just say that it doesn't exist, and that, you know, right, and that you know, like you said, if you study hard enough or you work hard enough, you can, you know, achieve this dream. And that's the problem, is that you just don't want to work hard enough. You know, it's not that there's a system in place or that there are policies in place or laws in place that oppress certain people. It's just that you don't want to work hard enough. It becomes so simple, so black and white. Then, like she says, it's the good and versus the bad. And we can, you know, we can be done with that and let's move on.
True, but good gosh.
I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks because reality hits them in the face later, and then that's why we have these issues now. But again, you're right, it really doesn't affect them too much because, like she said in the book, the system was made for them to think it was fair. Like, it's made for them, it's made by them. So, of course, we really can't beat it unless we change the whole system. So,
yeah, it's going to be a complete revolution of the system, because the system is modeled off of white being standard. You know, whenever we're determining the standard of anything, everything has a standard deviation. Whenever the standard norm is white, anything that falls outside of that is too far away for normalcy. And so how do we reshape the bell curve to include other cultures and other races in the paradigm? Because right now they're not included.
And they've done it before, though. Like she mentioned in the previous chapters, where, you know, before maybe the Polish or the Irish or the certain immigrants weren't included in white, then they were. And, you know, is it like the extremeness of the deviation that determines, you know, why they got in, and of course why we didn't. But I mean, the system's been changed before for others. Well, actually, it wasn't changed. It was just expanded to include others. So,
but the expansion included them because they looked the same and they assimilated well.
That's what I was getting ready to say. That's the difference, though, is that they have the same color skin. So once they lost their accent, or, you know, or like you said, even kind of toned down certain traditions or assimilated, you know, into American society, American standards, then it's easy for them you know, to just become a part of America, you know, and what's standard. And that's what happens because that's what they want to be associated with. So it's easy to say, yeah, I'm Polish, but, you know, really that's generations ago. That's in my past. Yeah, that's cool. But that's really, I'm an American. Mm-hmm. But, you know, because of my skin color, it's not easy for me to do that. I can't do that.
Yeah. And a lot of times they do push the story of the immigrant success
I think
of like
it's
an
going to be
example.
interesting to see.
There's Shonda. She did it every time. I was going to say the immigrant.
I'm sorry. Y'all know I'm delayed. So don't be acting crazy.
Oh, sorry. Sorry,
She got a guard dog over there. I mean, honestly, it's still kind of weird though because Spanish people, I feel like would fit right in with. It would kind of assimilate, but again, if they shed more of their culture, they'll be more accepted. But sometimes it still baffles me that they try to separate themselves from people of Spanish origin.
That was going to be my question.
What?
Go ahead. What was your question?
That's what I was thinking about, especially when it comes to them being the larger part of the majority. Are they going to keep their identity and their culture, or are the majority of them going to start identifying as white and contributing to that power structure?
Well, whenever you go to Miami, if you deal with Cubans, Puerto Ricans, a lot of the Hispanic cultures down there, they do mark white. They do identify as white.
Really?
And I had no idea until I started. Wow. I work with a company and we do business in Broward County. And that was whenever it was pointed out to me, is that most of the Hispanics down there, like not the Mexicans, because the Mexicans identify as Mexican, but a lot of, like I said, your Cubans, your Puerto Ricans, a lot of them in the Miami-Dade County areas identify as white.
Can't believe that. I mean, but it's not hard, and especially because Spanish, again, comes in so many different shades. I had a friend in high school who looked straight white girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, but she was Mexican. And literally, like, spoke Spanish, fluent, like, her culture is Mexican. But she was so Americanized, like, in her, she knew how to play her field, let me put it that way. She knew when to hang out, like, when she hung out with, when she was around her family or people she's very close to, the Spanish was fluent and flowing and everything else, but like when it was just around regular people in high school, we never would have known had we not seen her speak Spanish to somebody else. And so she could mark white and nobody would know the difference. I mean, it's just crazy though. I don't think I'll ever deny a part of myself to fit in. Well, if it does get you advantages in society, maybe. Because I know I don't lie to the system all day, every day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I lie all day, every day.
He said it gets you advantages, baby.
Did somebody say something? And you know, so in the book, she mentioned that stereotype whites have of saying, oh my gosh, I remember that paragraph now. But she was like, white people will say stuff like, oh yeah, I feel discriminated against all the time, but they can't point out specific moments. And when they say, yeah, I can't get help from the government, but a black person can. What? It's just craziness you make up in your mind. There are probably more white people on welfare than black. Well, It's probably
There are. No, there are.
All right. Because I want to say, I have car notes. Like, my job is calling people to collect for car notes. 9 times out of 10, I hear white people say, oh, I'm waiting on unemployment. Why are you waiting on that? Why I gotta wait for you to wait weeks for unemployment when you could be out here doing side hustles to get some money up? I know you got money. I know you just lying to me, but at least, like, the black people, they'll be like, yeah, I'm looking for a job. I'm doing this and that. I don't hear that from the white people. I'm sorry. Is that Yoshunda saying something and I just can't hear it?
I don't think so.
No, ma'am, that's the ghost in the machine.
Oh, okay. Somebody was talking quietly. I promise you, I heard it.
But I think that's just an attempt again to kind of, again, shift, again, being uncomfortable. So, there's the effort to say, oh, we're discriminated against too. Oh, my rights are being violated. I thought about the mask thing, where they're protesting the mask use. And it's just all those kind of, attempt to grasp at straws that I think it is, and then she even talked about affirmative action, how so many times they talk about affirmative action and that, it's just this horrible thing when in reality, more Caucasian women have benefited from affirmative action than any other group. But it's just so easy to throw out that stereotype because then it makes me, feel better and shift again. I don't have to examine anything.